أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم به نستعين الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم وفرجنا بهم يا كريم. Alhamdulillah, it's the second session in which we're blessed to talk about a very important concept. This concept is the idea of family life. The purpose of these sessions is simply to create a framework for believers, intellectuals, to allow the knowledge they already have to find itself into mechanisms of practice in their daily life and counteract basically initiatives of Shaytan that take place in the household. Almost like creating a repellent, if you will, of certain commonly occurring ploys that take place in the family unit. Last time we talked about certain concepts. We said that relationships are directionally specific. Okay, and I'm the manager of my direction towards my partner. Whatever the partner or associate ends up being. For a husband, it'll be a wife, let's say. For a parent, it'll be a child. For a sibling, it might be another sibling, and so on and so forth. I am the manager of that particular direction of the relationship. Okay. We also said that the same way that Shaytan fell and basically got captivated with the deficiencies of Adam alayhi salam, okay, is the exact same way that he tries to swindle us. He tries to make sure that we also get captivated in the deficiencies of our other, right? And in doing so, neglect the command of the commander. So in that particular action, we end up following Shaitan when we oppress our associate. So if a husband is to be a good husband only when his wife is good, or a wife is to be a good wife only when their husband is good, that mechanics says one thing, says, look, only when you don't have deficiencies, I'm going to do my responsibilities towards Allah. Consider this for a moment. If you were to hire a CEO or a manager for a company, okay, that particular manager, you bring them in and you say, hey, when are you an excellent manager? And they said, we're an excellent manager when everything is going fine and dandy. The moment things aren't going fine and dandy, we're not an excellent manager. You'd fire that person, right? Because, hey, I hired you as a manager position to do exactly that. When things aren't going appropriately, when things aren't aligning, that's exactly when you need to come out and do your responsibility. You need to manage. We talked about the idea of emotions as well. The emotions are toddlers, okay? These emotions are some things that we need to use to understand our needs, but use our intellect to communicate that particular need. When you do role reversal, and all of a sudden the intellect is no longer communicating, but the emotions are communicating, your upstairs emotions of I have a deficiency gets translated as I have frustration and rage, and that gets spewed outwards. Admitting to the deficiency is the first step in understanding that in that relationship, that thing that connects you to that person is a need of yours that you're seeking. That person happens to be just a pipeline Allah is using to give that particular sacred rizq to you. That's it. Every relationship is like that. You see, as humans, we only ever attach to positions, never to people. Consider this. Go to the shopping center, any place you go to. You look at the sales rep. Do you care if it says Mark, John, Peter? No. The specific name on that tag really doesn't matter. What matters is the position that you're interacting with. I challenge you. Consider any aspect of your relationship within your 24 hours. Throughout the week, is there any individual you connect with on the basis of a personage and not a position? Personages become important only when the positions are there. Let me give you another example. Consider that you are extremely connected to your spouse. You're only connected to them because of your spouse. Take the position away, some random guy or random girl. The position is what substantiates that connection to the person. Same with kids. It's very easy to put up with frustrations of your own kids because they're your kids. It's very hard to put up with frustrations of another person's kids because they're not your kids. But kids are kids. We connect to positions. And through the connection to positions, we find ourselves attached to persons. Understanding that each person themselves brings deficiencies to the particular role that they're playing. Each person brings their own kind of Swiss cheese, that particular position they're in. You're bringing your baggages, other person brings their baggages. This is an extremely important point to understand, that in the framework of Islam, we're not talking about individuals coming into positions and all of a sudden individuals not having any baggages to bring. No, the baggages are exactly what that particular position kind of needs for the other person dealing with that particular position to overcome those difficulties, to assist in how to digest those difficulties, right? To come up with mechanisms of interacting with those difficulties based on Allah's guidance. In some cases, it might be the end of a relationship, sure. In other cases, no. It might be the maintenance of one. But in both of those situations, mandated by Allah. Until that particular relationship is validated by Allah, you are an abd of Allah, obeying that relationship's do's and don'ts exactly as the owner of it tells you to do it. You see that? This management style is important. In our faith, we're not saying that the position takes value such that the person's baggage and negativities and weaknesses gets ignored. We're also not saying that cover the position in such a way that it covers the deficiencies of the person and now you end up just living with it. Both of those things create suffocation in the household. Both of those things are mechanisms and mechanics which don't allow for constructive growth in the household. Respecting the position is important. Respecting the person is important. However, understanding that deficiencies need to be both addressed and sought after in terms of diminishing by both parties is important as well. If a mechanism of problem solving in the family is let's sweep all the baggage under the rug, let bygones be bygones and just move on. Let's just forget about it. Forgive and forget and go forward. This is a great mechanism if you're meeting the person once or twice in your life. If you're meeting that person on the daily, that mechanism doesn't work. You know why? Because all of a sudden, the water under the bridge keeps getting bigger and bigger until it engulfs the whole bridge. You have a limited capacity of doing that particular thing. You have a limited capacity of letting things go and just forgetting them. In a family unit, you'll see that there are certain actions and activities that are oft occurring, frequently happening. Your nafs will find that in the quantitative measure, meaning how frequently some things are occurring, it'll find patterns. In the qualitative measure, something might occur very few times, but when that occurs, oh boy, is there chaos inside of you? You'll find that that particular pattern is available to you too. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted your nafs this capacity to have the quantitative measure and the qualitative measure in your disposal, in your hands. Why? So you sweep it on the rug? No. So you recognize the data points and build from there. That's extremely important. Shaytan will do one of two things. He will make you go into one extreme or the other. As Imam says, that a person who doesn't see things very clearly, that's exactly what Shaytan does. He comes and gives you a partial reality and makes you oblivious to the whole reality. And hence you don't see things very clearly. A person who doesn't see things very clearly will either be on one extreme or the other. Okay? Individuals who deal with problems in these two ways need to be very careful because both mechanisms are one extreme, has one impacts that are really severe, and others have the other extreme, other impacts that are really severe. One mechanism is ignore the problem, the ostrich mechanism. Okay? Hide your head in the sand and pretend nothing exists. That particular mechanism is a horrendous mechanism of dealing with family problems. Why? Because in and of itself, if that's the only mechanism you employ, good luck. You have not developed capacities to ensure that future hurt doesn't happen or a person isn't able to continuously build and develop habits which end up being harmful to you. sometimes out of recognition that they're harmful, other times completely oblivious. You haven't displayed that particular negativity the way it's supposed to be displayed with your intellect. You haven't identified the problem and they end up doing what they normally would be doing. And you're developing a situation where you feel suffocated now. Every day that goes by that the communication hasn't occurred and the quantitative measure of those problems keeps increasing, is every day that you're getting reminded to yourself that, well, maybe in this relationship I don't have value. But Azizam, perhaps you don't have value in this relationship because there's a communication mechanism that hasn't been employed. Does that make sense? We're working towards that, inshallah, today. When it comes to the family unit, if the mechanism of problem resolution ends up being one of a destructive measure, the ostrich method, ignore everything. Pretend it's not a problem. Everything is fine. There's no issues to be addressed. Then it becomes a very destructive method in the long run. The amount of pressure that ends up developing isn't something that you can handle naturally and normally. Not designed for that. Not pressure cookers, you're humans. The second particular idea is to excessively exaggerate the focus on simply the problems and the displays of something being a problem. To point out and to bring about mention of problems at every instance of their display at the same level, connecting them to past displays at every display. This is also problematic because your associate, husband or wife, has made a mistake level 2 in this particular situation. And your connection to the past mistakes that they've made allowed you now, validated for you now to respond at level 4. The 2 levels that you're given access or oppression in that particular situation. Because if they're not, you're saying that divinely speaking, I have been granted the authority by Allah to pass judgment on this bichare in front of me, on the past things that he's done. You're becoming the judicial system. If you want to take that responsibility, bismillah. But if not, recognize that particular reaction, if it's an excess, you might not have the authority to display that excess. You might not have the want to display that excess either, because you love your relationship, because you love yourself, because you love your needs to be fulfilled. A display of excess only begets another display of excess. And sooner rather than later, you're stuck playing fireball catch. And each person adds a little bit of petrol and passes the ball. As we talked last session, the dominoes, you have an ability to kind of control the domino and not flick it. But the only time you get that capacity is when the other person has flicked their domino. This is exactly what I'm talking about. In a relationship, in a heated argument, in any associate of yours, and I use the husband-wife relationship as a primary one, it doesn't have to be that. This idea needs to be solidified. That if you give an excess level of reaction, right, and that's typically going to happen when your emotions are the one communicating, then there are repercussions for that you're then partially responsible for as well. If you throw a fireball at somebody and then they throw a fireball back at you, at some level you're responsible for the fireball thrown back at you, and vice versa. Each participant in that domino flicking contest that Shaytan tries to dupe us into, each participant is a partial owner of the entire chain, depleting to whatever level it gets to. The blame game doesn't work there. It's not sufficient to say it's your fault and the other person says, no, it's not, it's your fault. It's not sufficient. At the end of the day, the owner of that relationship is looking at the manager and saying, wait a second. The management style, I'm going to ask you in your grave about how you did. I'm going to ask them about how they did. As the owner, realistically speaking, your management style is innate to you, O manager, and I'll be asking you for that. And your management style is innate to you, O other manager, and I'll be asking you for that. And the mechanism as Allah chose to make sure your management styles were tested, was Shaytan. I developed him in such a way that I utilize him. throw him into your mix, and only let him bother you to enough that is appropriate for the other. Only presents tests for the other that they can handle. And who says that? Me. As God, He says that I'm only providing you tests that you can handle. Meaning, even if Shaitan wants to hurt you at the max, I am putting a filter there, and you're going to see situations arrive in a level where you had the tools or have the tools to address and assess and grow. Every situation, by divine decree of justice, has that particular capacity in it. You're never thrown in a room locked without the key in your hand. Problem is, Shaitan closes the light and your understanding of what your key is. Sometimes you have the key, other times you don't know where the lock is to put that particular key. Shaitan comes and shows you partial realities and gets you bogged down in those. When it comes time to the family unit and relationships and associates, it's pivotal, it's extremely important to recognize that our responsibilities is to be the manager in that relationship as a representative of none but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How does that look like on the practical ground? I'm going to give you a few examples here. In relationships, there are certain areas where fights will occur. I'm going to give you two particular themes of fights. The first theme is where one partner or the other feels that they're undervalued. What that means is they're not appreciated in the relationship. The efforts that they've put forth in the relationships get undermined and neglected. They feel they've put level 100 and they're seeing the projections of level 1. All of a sudden, understand that perhaps there's a miscommunication happening over here. You see, displays of value also takes upon languages. Individuals who wish to show value by means of giving acts of service, for example, will be looking for value given to them via acts of service. Individuals who display value by means of affirmations and words and so on and so forth will be on the lookout for value in that particular mannerism and mechanism as well. What happens when two individuals are displaying a very high level of value, but the problem is that the mechanism and the language in which they're displayed are two different ones? A person displays value in English, and you want to hear value in non-English, French, let's say, if you're Canadian. What happens? You get in trouble. You both are, one person is claiming I show a lot of value, and you're saying that I actually am not showing any value. And vice versa. You say, I show them a lot of value. I do everything in this relationship. The moment thoughts like these occur, put a big question mark. I do everything in this relationship in which language and display of value? Verbal displays, physical displays, acts of service. In which criteria do I show value? Secondly speaking, they don't show me value. Is it an absolute kind of statement? Or am I saying that I don't see value in their words? I don't see values in the services that they should be doing in the household. I don't see value in, for example, affirmations through body language. Disconnect from, let's say, their phone or games. When you bring that particular statement to its appropriate measure, a partial statement, you only then allow yourselves to kind of perceive and say, wait a second, I understand this, but is it the case that I'm not valued entirely? Or it's the case that the language in which my value is being displayed is not in line with how I like value to be displayed? It's opening up for that particular relationship avenues of communication, avenues of understanding. You're addressing that the fundamental foundation of that particular relationship is sound. The problem lies in the communication structure that's built upon that relationship's foundations. If you innately maximize those statements of I'm not valued entirely, then you start to look for problems in the foundation while the problem was in the communications. You start to reassess foundational truths while you should be reassessing communicational realities. You see, Shaitan is very deficient. He doesn't have a lot of resources. If he was to hide the key over here, the simplest thing for him to do is to tell you the key is over there. Then the harder you try to go towards the key, the further you get from the actual key. And believe me, each and every single one of us is designed to strive immensely to overcome our needs. We're designed that way. So all Shaitan has to do is say your solution is over there. That's it. Well, the actual solution Allah has hidden is over here. The harder you strive in that particular direction, you're good luck. You're going further and further from the actual goal. Tangibly speaking, practically speaking, if I was to summarize this first example of value, I'd say in situations where the problem might be in the language in which value is displayed, you start looking for kind of confirmation that a value even exists or not. You create hurdles and tests to represent things which they shouldn't be. If they didn't pick up their phone, that means that they don't value me entirely. Okay. Is that correlation an appropriate one? If somebody says no to you in the now, have they said no to your existence? No. You yourself do it entirely too. Let me give you an example. In each instance in which your tawajjuh goes towards other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, independently to any of his creatures, independently. Okay. In that moment where you're doing that, are you saying that you don't value God? Or are you saying that that value is not being displayed? You can go to the moon and back, but the reality is you value God as much as you value your existence, perhaps even more. Inshallah. For some, more. Individuals who value themselves as important as their own existence is, that's how valuable the sustainer of that existence is. How valuable is, for example, a provider of a particular commodity? Well, as important as that commodity is. You see that? So it's not that you're saying, no, innately there's no value now for my existence. That's why there's no value for the provider of that existence. In the moment you lose attention towards what that particular action represents, and that's why you get dinged for it too. You see that? In certain places, you decrease in the effects of that particular action. You increase in the negativity of that particular action for yourself. Partial no's are not indications of eternal no's. You see that? Call somebody or you're addressing somebody, and in that moment you receive a rejection, you receive a no. That is not an indication of they're rejecting your essence and your existence entirely. Your entire position is being rejected over here. That's an important point to understand. Because Shaitan will come and make you infatuated with converting that no somehow into a yes. So no. If it's a rejection of my person and I crave this relationship, I want this person to value me, that's an innate desire of mine, then I will try to, in the beginning, try to convert every no to a yes. That's detrimental because in certain situations, that not respecting that they have to say no right now, right, means that you're telling them that, listen, in your lifetime, in your day, at any moment that I am showing up, you should be at my beck and call. Whenever I arrive, the Hazrat has arrived. Put everything else down and give your complete submission and tawajjuh towards me because I am. Wait, that's not how things work. That particular person is only in relationship with you because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala validates that relationship. If that validation from Allah was lifted from that relationship, that person, you're not mahram for that person entirely. It was a husband position. There is no value given to you. There is no emotional connection, attention, attachment of that particular nature given to you. Don't deserve it. Why? Because that validation piece of Allah is missing. And if that validation piece of Allah is what substantiates your actual value in your relationship, what if in this particular moment that particular person is doing an action which is by means of appropriately addressing that responsibility they have from Allah in that regard? Give you an example. An individual is trying to ensure that they're managing relationships between mom and wife. And there are situations in which they're trying to manage relationships between mom and wife, balance them, give respect and kind of rights to both, attention to both. However, in the moment it occurs that bilakhare, we can't do both at the same time, correct? One takes precedence over the other sometimes, and the other takes precedence over the one sometimes. Not in terms of value, but in terms of occurrence. See that? There's an occurrence. One occurs in such a way that it takes precedence. The other occurs in such a way that it might not take precedence. In terms of occurrence, there's a differentiation taking place. If they're occupied in one thing, not obsessively, not oppressively, but they've not been able to be responsive to you entirely, whether it be husband or wife here, huh? I gave the husband's example just for ease of purpose. You can flip it to the wife's example too. See that? In this particular relationship, what ends up happening is if that particular husband is trying to balance two divinely appointed responsibilities, but one partner of theirs or the other partner, in this particular case, the mom, right, all of a sudden looks at that particular interaction in that relationship in a unique way, where they're looking for a single-ended, partial gain, not looking at the system of Allah, is it being maintained or not? Then they're interacting in that relationship not as an abd of Allah, they're not representing Allah, they're representing themselves. And abd of Allah says this, hey, even though you've given access to me, but in reality, that access isn't mine, it's theirs. I'm here to assist you in you doing your job before Allah, not me raking in as much pleasure and benefit from you as I can. And what that means is that if I see that you're supposed to balance relationship between myself and this other particular responsibility of yours, and you're giving a little too much here or neglecting that particular thing over there, I'm still not happy. I'm still a partner who's trying to assist. It's very important to understand. There's a lady, her husband comes home, time of the Holy Prophet. The husband is really worried. Husband comes to the Holy Prophet and says, my wife is unique. Every time I come home and I'm worried, and she says, if the worry of yours is for the dunya, then know that dunya is going to end. Don't need to worry for that. If the worry of yours is for the akhirah, may Allah increase you in your worry. See that? The Holy Prophet says, that's a unique lady. That particular lady is one of the agents of Allah. Each and every single one of us has the capacity to be the agent of Allah for ourselves. The question is, when you get that troublesome, that worry, that negativity in your relationships, ask, is this relationship's worry based off of my needs not being met, based off of imbalance on the system of Allah? This husband of mine is not meeting my needs. This wife of mine is not meeting my needs. And it's not the case that they're trying to balance other responsibilities. They're single-handedly not meeting my needs. Or is it the case that they're striving to balance, right? And in that balance, they're making mistakes, and then sometimes my needs are not being met. Each situation is different. If a person says, who cares? The fact that my needs are not being met is all I'm worried about. And what is going to happen is their reaction will be the same in this situation and in that situation. It's not fair. It's not correct. Because in one situation, you need to awaken them to their responsibility before Allah, and the other, you need to assist them to balance their responsibility. There are two different mechanisms of communication at play, two very different ones. In one situation, the mode used to talk is entirely different than the other situations. If you don't recognize that, if you're occupied with only the end result, if you see nothing beyond your own nose, you just see your need not being met, and that's it, you're in trouble. It becomes very hard to manage your end of the relationship too. Because all of a sudden, everything that brought you in that relationship was nothing but your needs being met. And as soon as that particular person is not making the needs being met on this end, then all of a sudden there's a great push to make sure this direction also doesn't make their needs to be met. Then what happens? If they were failing a grade 5 question paper, you've now all of a sudden, by decreasing the supply of this particular direction of the need, you're giving them a level 6 question paper. And guess what? 9 out of 10 times, if they were failing a grade 5 paper and you gave them a grade 7 level paper, a grade 6 level paper, chances are they're going to fail too. Much worse this time. This is the tit for tat that takes place. If while you hadn't riled them up, they were not able to balance their responsibility towards you, then in this moment, when you confront with friction and anger, expect only one thing, that they will further not be able to balance that particular responsibility. Period. This is an extremely important point to consider. You're not going externally motivated into the scenario saying, oh, because Allah said so, I have to do this, or because this person said so, I have to do this. No. You're going based off of your need. Your need recognizes that you want your emotions recognize that you want your needs to be fulfilled, and you see that if you were to go and display those frustrations and anger, that person wasn't able to balance at the past phase. All of a sudden, if you make the situation a little bit harder for them, do you think they're going to be able to balance now? Chances are no. Guess who gets to suffer then? You. Your needs weren't being met over there at level 2. Now you want them to make level 3. You made the difficulty harder. Chances are not going to get met again. The exact opposite needs to be done. They weren't able to make the needs met with only level 2 level of supply given to them. Increase the supply and boost their nutrition, their emotional nutrition perhaps. That sets up an intellectually appropriate level for you to say, now that you've gotten the capacity further, perhaps now you might be able to fulfill that particular need. When you're boosting that, it's through communication. When you're expecting later on, it's through communication. You have to recognize that if you do all these actions without appropriate connections and communications, the other person might be completely oblivious to what you're trying to do, which direction they should be striving towards. If they don't know the direction they have to strive towards, it doesn't matter how much of a need that they feel inside of themselves to be that great spouse for you, they're not going to be able to be that great spouse. Consider yourself. Imagine you are thirsty, immensely thirsty. You don't know where the water is. You're going to move around directions. Every step you take is a resource wasted on. Do you understand that? And having some level of understanding where a solution might be even, okay? Some inclination towards a particular direction over the other is required for you to take a particular direction of movement. So when your individual, the associate that you're dealing with, your husband or your wife, your child or your parent, your sibling or whoever the case may be, a lawful relationship that you're dealing with in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is having a difficult time balancing their various responsibilities, their various associates. One of them happens to be you as well. Okay? Understand that in that particular situation, assisting them in balance requires a mechanism and a framework. They're not able to lift 2 kilograms, putting 3 kilograms on there, emotionally speaking, with frustration and upsetness, is setting themselves for failure, setting them for failure, and then that comes back to me, the failure too. Each partner is a ni'mal aun. For what? The ita'ah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? The greatest of blessings from Allah and obedience towards Allah. Not obedience towards just one relationship that Allah validated. Each partner coming into a marriage doesn't lose all other responsibilities just because they're married now. The other responsibilities holds true. They hold firm. Each Muslim coming into the relationship is trying to ensure that the other partner is a better submitter to Allah through all the responsibilities on their shoulder. Just as I'm trying to ensure that I maintain my responsibilities to Allah, of which this direction relationship is one of them. That's it. One of them. A partial understanding of this, being focused in one relationship simply and overlooking the other relationships and associates that you have to manage, ends up making you a caricature like manager. You know those Mr. Bobbleheads where the head's too big and the hands are too small and so on and so forth? You overextend importance to one relationship and neglect others, and then all of a sudden you've again not been balanced. You've again missed the mark in terms of management styles. This is very important to consider and understand. I'll also summarize today's session. We're coming to the conclusion. It'll be very simple. When we're looking at relationships, we have persons and positions. Positions are the ones that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala validates and substantiates and approves of. The person that finds themselves in that particular position often brings the deficiencies at their own intensity in that particular position. When you're creating a connection, you're creating a connection to positions. You can't help but do that. When you're creating this particular connection in a way where you're connecting to the person only because they're in that particular position, and you're liking that position and that particular person because your needs are being fulfilled. See that? And in that particular interaction with that particular person, you're liking this particular position because this is the pipeline, this is the mechanism by which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is fulfilling your needs. If there's a blockage in the pipeline, there's a deficiency in that particular individual, you're helping them overcome it so that your needs could be fulfilled. Does that make sense? As soon as it becomes helping them for them, frustration will increase, boiling points will increase, judgment styles will increase, and so on and so forth. Motivation will become different and warped. As soon as it becomes helping them for me, internally motivated things, that grants capacities to be saying, wait a second. In this heated argument, if I increase the emotional baggage, that person was already buckling their feet at the current level. Am I going to destroy them, or am I going to assist them by increasing the emotional baggage? Yes, I feel it. My needs are not being met. But if I end up displaying that frustration and that anger, that lack of need in those two emotions, am I assisting that person whose feet are already buckling? Or am I destructively assisting them? Meaning what? Helping them fall to the ground. If they fall to the ground, then I've broken the pipeline. Good luck then. It takes a lot longer to heal that pipeline, such that my risk can come from that. This shift in perspective is extremely important. Internally motivated individuals are able to interact with that relationships and then assess and say, oh, right now, an external display of frustration and anger is not appropriate. It doesn't benefit the situation. It actually makes my needs that are already not being met worse than they needed to be. Much worse. You see that? This is extremely important to understand. The love of the self is a bad thing when that particular self is limited to the dunya. But the love of the self is an extremely good thing when that self is connected to the owner of the self, and hence transcending the dunya. You want your needs met not only because of a worldly thing, because your fitra is designed this particular way. And the Sharia is coupled with the fitra. The Quran mandates that as well. Go after your needs to be fulfilled. In fact, it says, وَسَارِئُوا إِلَى مَغْفِرَةٍ. Ghufran is a covering under which deficiencies are taken away. Sari'u, hasten up. You tell somebody to hasten up who's already moving. Whether you like it or not, you don't have to be a Muslim. You're fitra. If you're a human, you're already moving towards getting your needs fulfilled. Islam simply is coming and saying, speed up in the right way. When you're controlling your anger, you're speeding up your needs getting fulfilled. When you display anger and frustration, you are slowing down your needs from getting fulfilled. It's very simple. An abd of Allah, the owned I, chooses to use intellect to communicate, as it's mandated by his fitrah and her fitrah, as well as it's mandated by the Sharia itself. It's a coupling of the two. It's internally motivated. This brings us to the conclusion of the second session. Inshallah, may Allah allow us to continue these sessions and talk about certain aspects of relationships and going forward every week. In the comments section of these particular videos, if you have questions, do ask, that I can address them in the following weeks as I see fit, inshallah. Fi amanullah.